So what is the Bible and why is it problematic? The Bible is the holy text of Christianity which claims that the Jewish God Yahweh created the universe. The Bible begins by describing how mankind fell away from a relationship with God because we had the free will to choose a relationship with him, but we disobeyed. In an effort to restore this relationship with mankind, the Bible suggests that God enacted a salvation plan in which he could appease his wrath by sacrificing his incarnate self on behalf of the sins of humanity. The Bible was written over many centuries by many different authors. The Bible is split into two different sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament. However, there are multiple subsections of the Bible such as the Pentateuch, the Wisdom books, and the Gospels. The Old Testament describes scientifically disputed supernatural events happening to God's chosen people Israel, the descendants of Abraham's son Isaac, whose genealogies went on to form the religions of Judaism and Christianity. In contrast, Abraham's son Ishmael went on to form the religion of Islam. Some of these Old Testament stories include talking animals and stopping time itself. The authorship within the Old Testament is heavily disputed because while many preachers traditionally attribute the authorship to the face value names presented within the Bible, many scholars remain convinced that much of the Old Testament was written anonymously after comparing the different writing styles and looking into the anonymous nature of the earliest manuscripts. The original manuscripts of the Bible is actually a document we do not have. The Old Testament describes morally extreme laws that many modern-day Christians reject, such as the death penalty for homosexuality, adultery, or picking up sticks on a Saturday. The Old Testament also notoriously condones rape and slavery, and despite the fact that modern Christians say they have nothing to do with this, it was because of these passages that colonial American slavery was justified in the 1800s. In fact, the Bible was the only book that American slaves were allowed to read. Many churches still refer to these morally extreme laws to push a political agenda. Conversely, the New Testament describes the Church of Jesus Christ, a man believed by Christians to be the supernatural incarnation of the Jewish God Yahweh, who was murdered by Jewish and Roman authorities for his radical lifestyle. The supernatural abilities of Jesus are attributed to him by the gospel narrative of his life, which was written anonymously, likely by Jews, in a completely different language from which he spoke, utilizing unverifiable sources. The New Testament describes Jesus as a man who rose from the dead and performed incredible miracles. However, there is no contemporary evidence to corroborate these claims, despite the fact that Roman historians were especially meticulous about their record keeping. The Gospels contradict themselves narratively multiple times. Like, who went to the tomb? Were angels there or men? What were Jesus' final words? How did Judas die? And the claim that 500 people saw Jesus after his death is nothing but a claim with no proof whatsoever to back it up. Many Christians point to the martyrs of Jesus Christ to prove that he was a supernatural figure. However, not one martyr was a verifiable eyewitness to the execution of Jesus Christ, and there are martyrs in other religions as well. Martyrdom does not equal truth, it equals intense belief. Much of the New Testament is comprised of letters written by Paul, a Jewish Pharisee who claimed to see Jesus in a vision after he died. The Bible ends with Revelations, which is an apocalyptic text that describes Jesus coming down from heaven to battle Satan in order to rapture his believers into heaven while the rest of humanity burns in hell forever. Christians point to biblical prophecies being evidence for Christianity. However, biblical prophecies were either extremely vague or were written post-eventum. Some prophecies blatantly never even came true. Despite billions believing that the Bible is objectively true and inspired by God himself, there are many internal problems that prevent it from being objectively true. For example, the Bible says that no man can see God face to face and live, but yet Moses and Jacob both saw God face to face and lived, and they are men. The Bible says that God cannot be tempted, but yet Jesus was tempted by Satan. God is described as having unlimited knowledge, unlimited power, and extreme mercy and love, but despite this, enacted his salvation plan to include unnecessary suffering that he himself caused. Like when he sent a bear to maul 42 kids for calling a prophet bald, or when he wiped out entire civilizations multiple times. Simply put, a God of love and power would construct his salvation plan to avoid torturing kids. God could have done anything to bring about the salvation of these children he commanded to be murdered because he can do anything in his will, which is total human salvation, but instead God chose to actualize a reality in which these children are murdered and tortured anyways. This means that for whatever reason, God is acting counterintuitively to how he is described in the Bible, which is syllogistically impossible. Many believers think that they can solve these internal dilemmas if they interpret the Bible metaphorically. However, there is no basis within the Bible or the congregation that is meant to explain what passages are meant to be taken metaphorically versus literally. Instead, the Bible is widely preached as objectively true, just like how the Quran is in mosques and just how the Torah is in synagogues. So what we have is a murderous God of love that will punish you with eternal damnation if you disbelieve in all Abrahamic religion. What a strange pattern. Like and follow, comment if you have any questions or refutations that I would be happy to answer. Also, check out the album in my bio that I spent the past year working on if you're interested in a very simple but thorough understanding of religion and how it's being exploited in America.